that long-term vision, like we mentioned in the beginning. You can't have the short-term, let me just give you candy now. I've got to look forward to the benefit of this child.
And if I don't, what does the kid do?
Well, I mean, if you aren't looking forward, you're essentially leaving the child almost like the parent in the beginning, saying, "Oh, well, they're resilient; they'll deal with it," and you're leaving them essentially out to the world to say, "All right, well, they're strong, they're tough, they're resilient." So when they start lashing out at 13 or trying to find or become promiscuous to try to find that love and attention, you're like, "Well, why did they do that? I just don't understand." Well, it's because you're dealing with a child here. They don't have an adult's framework of understanding. Understanding that an 8-year-old understands like an 8-year-old. Not a 28-year-old, not a 35-year-old.
But there are some 28-year-olds that think like an 8-year-old.
Oh, well, there is that. So
Right.
I can't help that.
Is this tied to what you said earlier about it's really important to understand that the child needs to communicate this?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I would say the first key here is communication. One, there has to be that communication for the parent to be able to sit down, even with the child, and say, "Hey, let's talk. What's going on?" And just being able to be that present person to listen. Because when the child is going to explain it, they're probably not going to be recording everything right, and they're going to misunderstand things, and they're not going to understand cues of this happened or that happened, or there were things that happened before even the child was born. They're not going to understand that, but they need that opportunity to sit there and express, like, "Well, Dad hurt me," or "Mom hurt me," and they're going to say it in a way, and the parent has got to be able to sit there and go, "Okay," and not correcting, because this is a time when a child is sharing how they recorded it, even as incorrect as it may be.
You're just trying to understand.
Exactly.
So would it be a valid assumption on my part to think that some parents don't do this because either A, I'm afraid I'll do something wrong, therefore I don't want to do anything at all, or B, how can I hear your pain when I'm so full of my own pain?
Exactly. And especially for the parent. And we understand, and this is a large part of the purpose of this program, that parents are dealing with their own loss too. They're grieving from something that is so important in their life, and they're dealing with it too. But you have the same child here who's dealing with that same grief and that same loss. And it's painful to hear it, especially when you don't want to. But at the same time, it will be even more painful for the child, for them to bottle that up and to move on with their life with that, because they never had the chance to express their hurt and their pain of saying, "Dad left, and I feel like it's because of me, because this one time I was writing him a note, or I kept asking him questions on the way home from school, and he just blew up, and I really feel like I shouldn't have asked these questions, or I shouldn't have brought it up, because that was what drove him away." And you're, as the parent, you're going to stop, and you're going to say, "That's not it. Well, honey, it's not because of you. It wasn't your fault." But when you're dealing with that child, they believe that.
Yeah. So I'm thinking back when I left my children back in '84, when I divorced Alice, I did see my children every other weekend. It's the only thing I did right during that whole period. I did see my kids every other weekend. But I could picture myself that if I were trying to talk about it, and if Joanna, based on a 6-year-old level, if Joanna somehow let me know that I was the bad guy, I mean, she wouldn't say it that way, but why aren't you here?
Yeah.
Why don't you love me? As a matter of fact, she actually did ask me that once. Why don't you love me? It was pretty painful for me, which is why I often would shut off the communication, because it's like, this makes me hurt too much. But what I'm hearing you say is, don't focus on your hurt here. Yeah. Focus on the kid's hurt. I think about it this way all the time. The child didn't ask to be born, therefore the child doesn't owe you.
Yeah, exactly.
You brought them into this world, you owe them. And even if it's painful, in the long run, Justin, do you think, even for the parent, even if it's painful to hear some of the things, that actually in the long run is actually good for the parent?
Well, I believe it is healthy. It is absolutely healthy, especially for the parent who has done some of these things, to be able to sit and to listen, because no matter what, this is your child. And your child is going to live a life, and you want them to live a healthy life. A life where love isn't something that is such a huge risk they wouldn't dare have it, or they give their love to everyone just hoping to be loved in return. You have to have that long-term vision where you can say, "Hey, this may hurt me right now, and this may not be something I want to hear, but it is important for my child to be able to express what they're feeling, express their hurt, even if it's not inaccurate, and even if I just want to stop them and say, 'You're wrong. That is not true. That is not right.'" And you become the fact checker. And it's not about your facts or, right or wrong or this or that or who said what or who started what. It's not about blame. It's not. It is about healing, and it's about healing for that child.
So no argument, no disagreement. Because if I argue against the child, I'm assuming either the child's going to become stronger in his or her belief because, like, I got to convince you, or they just finally decide you'll never understand.
Yeah, and they move on. And so this is a huge part of communication and relationship, to be able to allow that open space, that safe space for the child to be able to share what they're feeling. And what you're doing in this, especially with the now change, this is a different life than the child was, let's say, born into. You're essentially setting new communication lines for that child. And if you shut off the lines, it's like, let me just cut the lines of the phone right here just now. Even though what I'm saying I don't want to hear, let me just cut those now. Yeah, good luck trying to open those back up. Because back to the beginning, when we're talking about a child who shares their anger with the parent who they're closest to, it's because they feel safe being vulnerable to that parent. And so when that child is being vulnerable to you, you don't want to close that off.
Wow. Now, I know that you've come up with 3 keys.
Yes.
And I guess you're talking a lot right now about key number 1.
Yeah, exactly. So key number 1 is huge, which is essentially it's communicate through that pain. Key number 1, you've got to be able to communicate through that, because if you don't, essentially you're shutting off the pain and you're not validating it. You say, yeah, you can't feel that pain. That's wrong. You shouldn't be feeling that. Just turn that off. It's not that easy. A child is feeling something that they felt, regardless of how inaccurate it may be. They could have described the sky as being orange that day, but the child may have perceived the sky to be orange that day.
Yeah.
And so they need to be able to express that, because if you don't, they're shutting it off and they're learning, oh, I can't be vulnerable with you. I can't share what I'm really feeling with you. I'm learning that I can only communicate this way. And hopefully, the other parent's allowing me to communicate that. And I'm not having to shut off my emotion, because they're going to find someone who's going to listen to them.
At some point somewhere,
At some
right?
point
It might not be a
somewhere.
good person. This is similar in a way to what we tell adults in marriage situations, which is if a person says, I feel this, that's true for that person, whether you
Exactly.
think it makes sense or not. Therefore, to say something like, oh, you shouldn't feel that way, that's the most ridiculous, inane statement in the world.
Exactly.
You shouldn't feel this way. Like I chose it, right?
Exactly.
I mean, it's there.
The child chose that.
Or even this one. That's not what you feel. This is what you feel.
Yeah, and this is the difficult thing right now. You cannot comprehend through the same mindset as a child and an 8-year-old child. I'm sorry, you're not 8. You don't understand in the same way, but you have to be willing to listen to how the child is understanding, and you have to be willing to even go through some of the pain of what's happening yourself for the benefit of the child.
We deal with a lot of marriages in trouble, and it's very usual for one to say, he did this or she said that. What does that mean? And what is this person, what's behind that? And I always say, I'm not God. I don't know. As a matter of fact, if you want to know, there's one sure way to find out. Listen.
Yeah.
Ask questions. If you listen long enough, you can hear it. And sometimes a person will start here, and by the time they finish, they wind up way over there because they're actually processing out loud.
Exactly.
Right? Does that happen with kids too?
Exactly. And especially when they're beginning the process, it'll be something simple like, you moved my hairbrush, or you moved this, or why is my shampoo moved? Someone's always moving this. And all of a sudden they start bottling. And again, here they're channeling some of that anger, and it's coming out through 1 or 2 outlets. But if you shut it off and you're like, you're just wrong. Why are you always upset? Why are you always mad? You're shutting off what the child is really getting to. And again, you're dealing with a child. The child can't process and stop and say, maybe I'm connecting this anger to the fact that my dad has left and I'm lashing out at you. No, a child's not going to be, a 5-year-old psychologist who understands the comprehension of how mindset works. No, they're a child. They're gonna let
Nor
emotion
do you
out.
need to be a
Exactly.
psychologist.
Exactly. And neither do you, but you have to be able to engage in communication, even if it's painful.
And that involves a lot of listening.
It does. It involves a lot more listening, I would say, than just trying to correct or trying to extend your mindset, because that's also dangerous as well, where you're pitting one parent against the other and you're trying to say, no, you feel this because your dad did that. And that manipulation, again, we're talking about health for the child here throughout their life, not just winning a battle or winning some sort of contest or conversation. That again, is not healthy for the child.
Many, many years ago, I was invited to come in and do 6 different Tuesdays, I think it was, for a couple of hours with some kids who were 7th graders who were at risk of dropping out of school.
Yeah.
And the very first one, over the intercom, they call the name of these 6 kids and tell them to come to this room. And they walk in, and here I am. I don't look like them.
Yeah.
I was a different color. I was a different ethnicity, et cetera, et cetera. But they came in, and they looked at me with like surly looks, like, who the heck are you? Only I don't think they used the word heck.
Yeah.
Okay. And this one guy said, I don't want to be here. I said, I certainly understand. You walk into a room with some guy. Tell you what, if you'll just sit through this session, then we'll go down to the principal's office and I'll make sure that you don't have to come back. We got to the end of our session and I said, okay, let's go down there. And he said, no, I think I'll stay. And I said, why? And a girl answered for him. Mm-hmm. She said, because you treated him with respect. And apparently he didn't feel like anybody in his world was treating him with respect. So it really, I realize a 13-year-old's not a 3-year-old, but it has to do with, I am actually listening to you. All right. So what's key number 2? Are we ready for that yet?
Yeah, absolutely. Key number 2. And just finishing that thought right there, a child is a person. Mm-hmm. No matter how small, they're a person. They have a heart. They have a mind. They have emotions. And just like you want to be validated and loved and all these other things, they're in the same way. Mm-hmm. But absolutely. On to key number 2. So key number 2, and this one I think is key, it's building bridges of communication. Right? So not only is it communicating, even if it's painful, but it's finding ways to communicate. And it's finding ways that even though it may be painful, even though there may be things that are going on, maybe there's divorce that's happening or separation, the bridges for communication are just as important because they allow you to have ways to continue that communication. Because
okay. I'm not quite following this. So what does that mean?
Okay, so essentially, and I'll give an example here. So let's say you have that really painful conversation with the child, and you're able to open up that time for the child to be able to share, right? That's important. Mm-hmm. But it's also important now that you've got that phone line connection to keep the phone ringing and to go back and forth, to find ways to say, hey, on, let's say it's every other weekend, we're going to talk, or I'm going to write you a note, or I'm going to send you a text message in the morning, because what you're wanting to do is you've opened up that vulnerable state where the child is sharing what they're feeling. You don't want to just allow it to close off. Now they shared, they got it off their chest, and they're going to run away and hide because they'll go right back into that withdrawal. They shared, they were letting some of the anger out, and they're going to hide away from what they said because it was a vulnerable state, and a vulnerable state doesn't always happen. But what you want to do is begin to build those bridges, I would say, of communication between the parent and the child, especially talking through what's happening. Say, hey, here's a note, and I'm going to write you a note every other day saying, hey, I love you. Mm-hmm. You're an amazing person. You're a wonderful daughter. You've got to find ways to communicate, and it's different. Use technology. Use a text message. Find ways.
Back in '84, text message, you wrote on a piece of paper, put an envelope, sealed, and put a stamp on it. It was a different world. Does something like play therapy come into work?
Exactly. Play therapy is another scenario where you allow the child to be a child by playing, right? Mm-hmm. So the child is able to sit down, they're able to play, and they're able to talk through ways that is in their world with you as a parent. So it's that safe space where the child is able to communicate with you through play. It is a beautiful example of a way that you can build bridges of communication, allowing the child to be a child.
All right, so a parent doesn't instinctively know how to do that. Are we going to help people know how to do that?
Absolutely. And so this is one of the things that we're doing on the program. We're essentially building the skills that a parent would need to be able to utilize play therapy in their home and building and improving that parent-child relationship through communication.
So this is the kind of thing that's going to be on whataboutme.org.
.org, exactly. So this is a great example of a way that we're taking a tangible, research-based skill, we're bringing it into your home through your phone, through your computer, that you can learn these skills to use them with your child.
So and of course you run this division, I don't, so that's why I'm asking some of these questions. So it'll be somebody on a video teaching the parent, or
exactly.
Audio, written, what?
Exactly. So we have an expert in play therapy, and she trains counselors and professionals to do this.
I've actually heard she's very, very well known for this.
She is very well known for this.
Cool.
And she's going to come onto our program through video and through some interactive ways that you as a parent can learn, okay, this is what play therapy is. And some of them are simple. There's nothing that you have to buy this special thing or do this special thing. If you have toys in a child, that's something that can be taught right there.
Now, I'm assuming that play therapy is going to be age specific, like probably not with an 18-year-old.
Exactly. You might not take an 18-year-old with Play-Doh and say, all right, let's just play. I would say it's age specific, especially when you're dealing with children who, it may not be as cool to play with these toys, but there are ways to use play therapy, especially when you're dealing with younger children, to be able to say, hey, we're going to create this space, and this is a safe space where we're going to play, and we're going to play through what's going on. And you might ask a simple question and allow them to play.
So what is a parent going to have to pay to learn how to do this?
Nothing. The program is free. It is absolutely free, because the big thing that we're behind is the people in the most need this help. And they don't need to be charged at all to be able to help a child in need. And that's something we firmly stand behind with this program. The children in the most need do not need to have to pay anything for this.
Nor their parents?
Nor their parents.
As a matter of fact, you showed me a statistic once that just flashed into my brain that about what, half?
Yeah, about half